Good afternoon. We are in session. Today's the last, the penultimate actually work session, because we have still besides wrap up, we have also a markup session. So, but as a work session where we seek, information about the items that we we may have still residual questions on several items on the budget. First of all, let me preface that with two things. One, thanks for the libraries for having us again here and for continuing to support our operations during this budget season. And secondly, I want to just advance thanks to all staff from the Department of Management and Finance who have been working very diligently to bring us to the last part of this small odyssey that the budget of the fiscal year 2026 is. So we are in the final stretch, colleagues. I want to start with one commission that we haven't heard from yet, and for a reason, because this is the commission of our Fiscal Affairs Advisory Commission that actually, like we do, collects all the input that comes in for informing the budget of every single fiscal year, and then provides us with a report and opinions and proposals on what we should be considering in the next few days that are between now, markup session, and final adoption, which I again say is on April 9th. So, Ms. Burgess, thank you for being with us today.
Thank you so much, and thank you to the board for this opportunity to share a summary of the commission's discussion. This was, as for us as for you, this was a little different year with the compressed time schedule, so our report is a little different than it's been in the past. But as in past years, we've been very cognizant of the need to balance the budget. And so our discussion is always focused on if there's something that we want to add, we have to talk about what we would take away. Or if there's revenue that we don't think should be increased or isn't coming in, we're cognizant of the need for a balanced budget. We'd also really like to echo the thanks to staff. Richard and the team at DMF has been super helpful, but we read the budget, we see the work of staff throughout the county. We know it's a huge lift, and we really appreciate the work of all the county staff, and I will personally call out the IT staff that allows us to watch these videos after the fact at double speed, but we really appreciate staff and all their work. So, to the good stuff. FAC this year focused on 4 themes, recognizing that it was a really tough budget year. We wanted to focus on 1, maintaining our safety net, the ability of the county to take care of neighbors in need. 2, maintaining flexibility. There's so much uncertainty in this budget. We really wanted to focus on where are we leaving that flexibility. 3, investments in the future. We wanted to make sure we weren't shorting things that would come back to haunt us later. And 4, core services, obviously maintaining the level of service and the core services that we all expect from Arlington. I won't read this word for word or go through every little detail that we talked about, but I do want to highlight the big themes, first of all, that we thought should be considered for change from what the manager proposed. And I know it's a little bit confusing this year, but just to be clear, we're all talking about the baseline being the proposal. So first of all, the support for libraries. We agreed with you guys that libraries are cathedrals to our community. They're foundational to democracy, and it's particularly important in a time when many of our neighbors are going through special challenges, and there is a lot of uncertainty that we adequately fund this actually very small part of our budget. And in particular, what stood out was the collections one-time money, that it's a lot less than this year and would lead to much higher wait times than it has been in the past. So that's something that there was a lot of support for increasing the one-time funding for libraries collection. Again, we're very cognizant of offsets, and I think there was a lot of support for what the Parks Commission articulated very well when talking about Cherrydale Park. That one might not be ready for design quite yet. We might need to think a little bit more about what the best use of that space is. And conveniently, those two numbers offset. So another thing that we talked about was Longbridge Aquatic Center. That is a big part of our budget. The county support for Longbridge, as you know, has been offset by Boeing funding, and we actually very much support staff's recommendation. We think it's very smart to start weaning ourselves off of the Boeing funding so we don't have a huge cliff in the future. However, we thought that it might be possible to use a little bit more of the Boeing funding in this year, in particular to make sure there's access to this prime county resource that we do dedicate so much of our budget to. We note that there's no transit accessibility to this, and we saw, because of the questions you guys asked staff, that there might be some options to do microtransit or a shuttle or some pretty fiscally modest ways to increase access. It could be a pilot. We could study what it does for attendance at the aquatic center and see if that helps. So again, by using more of the Boeing money this year, that reduces the general fund support, leaving money in the general fund to fund transit access. Public safety, then we had two things that we noted that we were a little concerned weren't funded in the budget, though we didn't have a direct ongoing offset to them. Both of these are would be ongoing costs. First is public safety compensation. We listen to the sheriff. We understand that we have this large segment of uniformed officers. I won't repeat the whole thing, but we do very much value all of our uniformed officers. And importantly, from a budget perspective, we know that when we don't have enough sheriff's officers, we really have, sheriff's deputies, we have a huge expense in overtime. So that's one of those penny wise, pound foolish sort of things that you can get into if the funding for the sheriff ends up leading to too much overtime. So that was a concern that we had without a direct offset, though we do note the $1.5 million in unallocated could potentially be used for a one-time bonus. And then also the principal planner position in CPHD, especially with the planning commissions. We sort of echo the planning commission's concerns with that one, that could, with the cross-staffing model that CPHD is moving to, could be a revenue-generating position. And as you'll hear in a minute, we did have some concerns with the time and delays in permitting processes. So, don't want to cut positions that exacerbate that problem. Okay, much faster, the things that we talked about, but we didn't recommend to change, the meals tax. We do recognize that this has the potential to decrease the number of people eating out, and that could really hurt the small businesses. We're particularly concerned with the small businesses and their employees, but I think on the whole, we think this was a good solution for revenue in this time, because eating out is somewhat optional, and the other sort of option, increasing the real estate tax, would also hit restaurants. And many of the people eating meals in Arlington are not residents of Arlington, conveniently. The advertised increase in the real estate tax rate, we are supportive of not increasing the real estate tax rate, consistent with a lot of the comments that you guys have had. This one was, the meals rate versus income tax rate, I think it was a closer split than a lot of the other things that we've talked about, but I think on the whole we were supportive of what was proposed, because the real estate tax rate would be a mandatory tax. You couldn't just choose not to eat out. Permitting related fees, while we were comfortable, generally we were supportive of calibrating the permitting related fees to cover 100% of the cost of the permitting process. That part we think is great. We do echo the concerns that there has been delay, and the time of the permitting process plus the cost of the permitting process can lead to burden on people who want to develop in Arlington. And we know that new development adds to our tax base. So from a budgetary perspective, it's great to get those projects in the pipeline and done so that we can add to our tax base. So we're really, we encourage CPHD to look for ways to streamline that process. The increase to the economic stabilization reserve, we just wanted to highlight, we're supportive of increasing that reserve to allow flexibility in this current time, but we really wanted to echo that the increase in the proposed budget was to deal with current uncertainty, and if there's a recommendation that that fund should be increased to a level permanently, it's great, we should have that discussion. We haven't really had that discussion. It's been more, this is a particularly uncertain time, so it should be bigger for these uncertainties. Should it be bigger going forward? Let's have that discussion in the future, but not assume that that 2% is the right level. Consolidate the CPHD Housing Information Center. This was an example. We don't recommend doing it, but we do recommend looking into whether that consolidating information could actually lead to better service and lower costs. And then finally, with reducing art service, we note our discomfort with reducing transit service, particularly in the central corridor of the county for all the reasons you guys discussed during work sessions. But in the end, we were comfortable that this is the best of the bad options for this route, or for transit on the whole. And then finally, the future considerations that we're going to follow up on are pilot programs. There's been a lot of pilot programs in past budgets, and we sort of realized we don't always know where to find the outcomes of those pilot programs. Some, like the Vision Zero pilot projects, there's web pages you can go find all the data. It's great. Sometimes it's in the next budget where we say this is the outcome and therefore we're funding it or we're not funding it. But sometimes it just, you don't know what happened. So we had some examples. Something we like to call over-engineering. Sometimes Arlington strives for the best of the best, and maybe we could just do the best in service delivery or projects and get more bang for our buck. And then finally, efficient use of public property. Facilities are a really large part of our budget, and it leads us to ask, are we using these facilities efficiently? Do we have facilities, for example, that are closed that we're not using on the weekends? Well, can we figure out a cost-effective way to use those? And are there private partners that would be good options there? For that, I keep looking at this building, looking at the buildings next door, and thinking this particular property could be much bigger, and the Northern Virginia Community College doesn't have a location in Arlington. Is there space there? So that's a theme that, maybe there's a partnership where we could be more efficient in how we use our property. So I know that was a lot. Happy to take questions, and again, we really appreciate the opportunity to give our feedback.
Thank you so much, and thank you to all commissioners for a lot of work that went to studying all that and to have an informed opinion on these. Colleagues, if you have questions for our fiscal advisory, easy. Our fiscal advisory commission, any? Vice Chair DeFerranti?
I'm trying to sort of synthesize your letter and your comments, which tracked mostly, but there were a couple others, and I was sort of trying to triage and quickly. I agree with you on the 2% and the comments there. On the Cherrydale, I guess since you mentioned it in your letter, I guess I don't know if that's a pending question or if we haven't talked about it until right now and the change in how Cherrydale would be approached. Is it a pending question, or can someone shed a little light on this before we get to Thursday?
I believe it's a funded project in FY26 PAGO budget. And the suggestion is that, at least as fact discussed, is that the best use where the park is? accessibility, Jillian, you can talk about the things that the commission and the other commission talked about.
Yeah, so I believe this was in the Parks Commission's recommendations, though if I believe correctly, it wasn't really highlighted in much of the discussion, so that's fair. This particular location is a very steep park that's mid-block behind a lot of houses. And on the one hand, Parks is correct that it has not been updated in a very long time, and it's not ADA accessible. And the funding description, I believe, said it was to design a park and playground that would be ADA accessible. But as Parks Commission noted, and as we discussed, that would be a really difficult task. And given, it's not that far from Ham, it's not that far from Cherry Valley, Maywood Park, and Science Focus, and Hayes Park, and Oak Grove Park, maybe there would be a better use of that property, and maybe we should have that discussion before we allocate the funding to design the park.
And I should note that this is basically a question about deferring that for a time. This is just to offset a different, have a different preference, all right? Invest that in accessibility or transit accessibility for Long Bridge, right?
That would actually be to invest in the libraries.
Oh, no, for libraries,
Yeah.
yes, sorry.
So I think I'd like to, it's a one-time piece, and I'm not staff, and so it's a capital project, but I'd love to see if that's a question that we've thought about at all or could be answered. Ongoing is, of course, more important than one time, and I'm not always in a place to offer thoughts on merits of capital projects. Mr. Manager, you may.
Well, first of all, I respect what the Parks Commission said on it, and I have put this into the bucket of things that I think the board should look at in June if you're looking for additional ways to slow down spending and reallocate it. If this is a project that we can put off, I'm not sure I would agree, I'm not sure I disagree, that I would take the money and put it into the library's budget. We may need it for other things, but I certainly think it's something to look at once we know where we are. But the board may choose to do that now, and we'll give you a recommendation, but I'm not sure that I would pick it for library, the library's collections or, yeah.
Sure, so if we did that, that would be a separate, it would not fit into the 11.5 million, it would be a separate 500,000 available for one time. Okay. But there's a little bit of challenge if we delayed it and then we're actively considering in June funding it. That's sort of like one time for 2.5 months, right?
No, I mean, we will not pull the trigger on doing any work on this until July 1st, so the money will just be resting in place.
Until a proper revision and adjustment of the budget that happens before the fiscal year starts. Ms. Cunningham.
Yeah, I think on that piece, Mr. DeFronte, we've been talking about PAYGO overall, and I think my goal, and I think our shared goal, is to have a portion of PAYGO in mind for that June conversation, whether it's 10% or 20% that we could hold back if we're in challenging times. And I think this is one that's at the very top of the list for the reasons of maybe it should be natural resilience instead of playground, given the proximity. I wanted to ask a couple questions on the Long Bridge access and Art 43. So I think you guys had said you support the reduction of Art 43. We've had some further discussion about whether one might completely reduce Art 43 in order to free up additional pilot funds for the type of thing that you mentioned, the piloting access to Long Bridge, which is extraordinarily inaccessible for anyone but a biker right now, or a driver. Did you guys talk about that at all, or did that concept come in a little too late for you guys to hit it?
Yeah, that unfortunately came in a little too late. But in general, we support having transit. And so there was a lot of support for transit, and we looked more to the Boeing funding for transit to Long Bridge. But
okay, gotcha. And then I had one other question to the manager. There's a list of pilot projects there, several of which I know where to find the updates to the extent they exist. But could we zip through that list for FAC either live today, or we could come back with an answer to a question of where one can find those updates or when they are expected.
Yeah, no, I'm going to say, I'm just looking at the list right now because I just look at it when the letter came in on Friday.
You haven't committed every single letter.
No, well,
Memory.
I'm just going to say that for youth and teen investment, we did a write-up in the budget on that. We're happy to provide any additional details right now. On housing grants for youth aging out of foster care, I don't have anything immediately. I don't know, Michelle, if you had anything you wanted to add on that?
Yeah, I mean, they just had.
I think the hard thing with pilots sometimes, I think, is a review that they start immediately on July 1st. It takes a while to ramp up and to find qualified folks. I do know that there have only been 2 participants in that foster care project so far. We can talk through how we can provide better reporting, but I want you to know there's point in time and client that, and its eligibility, especially on those DHS things, is pretty sensitive, and you know what I mean? So anyway.
Yeah, and I think in our DHS work session, they shared a little bit about, they've opened it up, and happily, I guess, in some ways, there are fewer people that are qualified right now than needed, so it's probably not time to evaluate the pilot yet, but it's the right question.
Yeah, so on Green Valley, I know we have a follow-up, and I think that's, and I'm going to ask Emily to go through the list of pending follow-up questions that we're going to get to you in the next day or so. Performance parking pilot, we did talk about that in the work session. I don't know to what extent, and I can, if FAC had more precise questions about the percentages and we were tracking that, we did provide information on that in the DES work session. On the fare-free bus pilot, I'm drawing a complete blank, other than to say that I know Montgomery County just went to
We did it in
fare-free.
like January or February.
Yeah. E-bikes in the Arlington County fleet, I don't know if we have current information on that. I know we procured them. I know they're being used, but beyond that, we owe you further details. Battery electric buses, the first group of 4, I think, are arriving in the next 60 days. And Vision Zero, I think, on pilot projects, I don't have anything immediately. So we can fill in the blanks on that to the extent that we don't have anything immediate.
I think the point that FAC raised is a reasonable one. The board oftentimes puts one-time money to look at something. And FAC as a commission will often ask me, well, how's it going? And where can we find that? And a lot of times it's a work in progress, just like Michelle said, things don't always start on July 1st. So I think it's something that we can talk to the commission about and see how we can integrate that into the budget process. And, but it's a fair question. The community wants to know where things are that the board has funded, so we'll look into.
Yeah, I think that's great. And I think youth as an example, same thing. It's a little pushed out, but you shared a little bit about what's been done. Hiring just happened. But I think I'm hearing and what's coming next and when will we know, so sort of a look ahead to the pilot ahead. Thank you.
I'm going to Ms. Coffey first and then to you, Mr. Okay. Yes.
Thank you. I know FAC is always so responsible at looking ahead, and I think it's been alluded to a number of times in our work sessions that there's a likely June conversation to come. Did FAC have any discussion, really looking at this is what we want to do for now, but if the situation gets worse, where you would recommend going next in terms of cuts or reductions?
We didn't have it in terms of cuts and reductions. We actually had it mostly in terms of the
Revenue.
stabilization reserve, because that's only been used, I believe it's 3 times in the past, and we just wanted to make sure that we weren't putting money in there and then still not using it if we needed it. But happy to have more of that discussion.
Yeah, absolutely. And we did not task you with it, but no, that makes sense. And I guess on the stabilization reserve for the manager, in the miraculous case that we don't end up dipping into it in the next fiscal year, does that money ever become available to us again, or does it remain locked into the reserve in perpetuity?
Yeah, I was very careful in what I said and what I didn't say. I didn't say, for example, that the board should permanently move the 1.3% level to a 2% level forever. I said we should add the money for this purpose. So it is sort of in a quasi land. I don't know what I would describe it, but that's a policy question for the board to take up once we have a better sense of what the fiscal situation is going to be. But that's, so I'll leave it at that.
So at the moment, it would not be locked in, but it could if the board decided to revise our policy.
Well, let me put it this way. If in some miracle, it turns out that there is no concern anymore about federal funding, then I would immediately say that money should be pulled back out and used for things that we might otherwise have used it for. It might be other one-time expenses.
Like a 43 bus or no?
Or AHIF or some other needs, but
Yeah.
we're not in that situation
Okay.
yet.
No, great. That's helpful. I think I've heard from a number of community members, just I guess a little bit of concern that like, well, it's really important that we plan for the worst case scenario, but if we don't end up in the worst case scenario, does that mean we've just lost out on a year of AHIF essentially? And so it's helpful to kind of understand, I think, the greater dynamics there. And then I guess on, where's that? Pilot programs. I think I'll leave it there for now. I think most of my other questions are more wrap-up manager-related questions and less back questions, but thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Coffey. Just as a editorial footnote to that, our decision is about the percentage that goes, what percentage it should be, so we can change the percentage.
Well, your adopted financial policies right now, they were changed when you adopted the budget in fiscal '25 to move up to 1.3%. As of right now, there is no policy conversation on the table to change that permanently to a different number. What I've done is I've said, let's allocate the 11 point whatever million dollars to the fund for the purposes of dealing with the pending or possible economic challenges regarding administration policy. I was intentional not to say, please raise it permanently from 1.3 to 2.0. Does that?
Yeah, it does.
Okay.
But it's still under per policy, we have an
Yes.
obligation to repay.
To repay it over
if
2 years. Yes.
Over 2 years,
We
which
use
is a
it. That
question
is-
for you if 2 years is still a good idea.
That is correct.
So, Mr. Spain, sorry for.
Oh, there's no sorry. You're fine. Well, first, let me thank to the chair and the entire Fiscal Affairs Commission for your hard work in this. And I am, we've had conversations about public safety, and you made some recommendations or talked earlier about what we should do perhaps for the sheriff. I just want to see how extensive your conversation went outside of perhaps the offset. You mentioned Cherrydale, perhaps there's money there. I get it. But I think you also made note about the morale issue. I always talk about the human factor, right? Like, as you look at the manager's proposed budget, are there any other areas that you think that we should be looking at to help aid and assist perhaps the sheriff's department per se, from the scope of the entire budget? Any recommendations out of the commission outside of Cherrydale?
I'm trying to remember the entire discussion. I don't think, we did spend some time saying, yes, this should be funded, and flipping through and looking for other ways to find some money to fund it. The other thing that we recognize as a commission is that we don't have the inside expertise. It's one of the reasons we're so appreciative to staff. And I love Ms. Cunningham's button. I mean, I think we support our federal workers. We also really support our Arlington County government workers. They work very hard for us, and they also try very hard to find all of, everyone in DMF is working very hard to find all of these things. And so part of it is what motivates the people on the ground. Is there another subsidy? Is there another bonus? Is there something else that would help them? We didn't have that information. Yeah. And I know that staff spends a lot of time looking at that. They do comparative compensation surveys, and that there are a lot of people in Arlington County who are working really hard to find those answers.
Yeah.
I don't know if there's anything, sometimes some of those are a little out of date just because you have to take time to do them. I don't know if anything could be re-upped, any other, survey of staff could be done.
Yeah, I guess the basis of my question derives from, again, my first time around this cycle, I look at the role of all these commissions and what they're charged to do as, like in your case, being the independent review of the county manager's budget and just trying to gain perspective outside of what staff provides, right? Because we really do, in this case, at least I do, want that independent eye, right, on what's going on, how the sausage is being made. And I really want to, again, thank you for, your recommendations. I know you did not take a formal vote. You mentioned also at the end about some areas that we should, we talked about it a little bit here, future considerations. I think, we really have to, I think something we can work on is when we identify these pilot programs, is we used to call this like investigations from CTG, from cradle to grave, like from inception to the end, tracking the whole line. I think we could do a better job because to this point, like some initiatives in here, they either haven't started, no one knows where they're at, and there's still some work to be done. So thank you for making those recommendations, as to say, so that gives me at least a scope of where I should be looking at this year.
And if I can just clarify, I think I personally, and I think the whole commission, is confident that staff is tracking it. It's just a matter of transparency and knowing where to find it and being able to pull it together. And also, we call it the off-season between budget approval and budget proposal. If you guys have anything for us in the off-season, we are happy to take recommendations.
I understand what you're saying, that staff is doing amazing work. County Board, we're charged, we need to know this stuff. But also in the community, folks who have worked hard behind some of these projects, they need to know what's going on, right? They need to understand that. And I think that sometimes can be a challenge. Point them in the right direction. You mentioned earlier about a few pages, visions, whatever. I mean, we would need to make it simplified so people understand, like, what's going on with this project, right? That's my point. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Spain. From me, two quick questions. First of all, one note. The e-bikes in the Arlington County fleet, I've seen them in DES knows because they use them, and they're awesome. And actually, we would appreciate experienced opinions on how they perform a year after they have been, in service. They're yellow, they're very visible.
The police also have a very cool e-bike.
Correct, that's newer.
Yeah, that's new.
And this is not yellow, this is like black, right? Yeah. Okay, and the second thing is on the 43. So I understand that the commission understands the balance between, if you reduce service, you reduce significantly more the attractiveness of a line for ridership. So as a philosophy, when you show tolerance here for the reduction in service for Art 43, does this mean that you consider that and given that this is a line that is redundant, right? It's like an express line on top of Metro, which is slower in this case. Does it mean that this is a line that you could you see it completely going away for now?
I don't think, I would say the commission in general would not, think that would be the best choice. In particular because children and students can ride buses for free, they can't ride Metro for free. And HB Woodlawn is a countywide school that's on this line, that's served by this line. So I would definitely want to look into the ridership numbers and talk to the school about the implications there. But what we saw in the proposed reduction is that it basically put bus and Metro on even footing, which seemed, on even time delay, sort of, to get from point A to point B, which seemed like a fair enough in this difficult budget time. But as you notice, there's tons of other stuff in the budget that we didn't comment on at all. Yeah. And this rose to the level of saying, it's okay, but we want to comment on it. So.
Okay, good. And I have to say, HB Woodlands always strikes me as a school with a high ridership, actually. I don't know why this is the case, probably because the kids are instructed to take public transportation. And I know that my colleague, Ms. Coffey, is really anxious about 43 because she loves the
Yeah. Well, and I'll just say that was, the free fare for students started as a pilot program, and that's one of those things. The data is out there, and I know that staff is tracking it. It's just not all in one place. And I know HB Woodlawn in particular has done some specific things to get kids to ride transit, and it would be great if that information were in one place so schools could share it.
I'm kind of a parasitic user of 43, running up the hill from Roslyn to here, and I coincide a lot of times with HB Woodlawn riders. But they have options for this, other options. So thank you. Any other questions for our commission? No, thank you. So on to other questions. So I distributed a small list just for like a help to structure our conversation of different departments, and there are different asks for related to each department's budget. So I would just propose to start with DPR, the Department of Parks and Recreation. Are there any questions there? Mr. De Ferranti? Oh, no, I don't know.
I'm grateful for you separating the categories. I actually think that I only have 3 total questions.
That's good
But
for me.
childcare is one of them, and just to note that we got an answer back on the childcare fee. I'm interested in one time for the $6,000 for that, just to note, and that is all I have in that bucket.
Anybody wants to respond to that? Or comment?
I think it's a markup question for Thursday, so
Okay.
signal.
So one question that I was expecting was about the Boeing thing, because this is under DPR, right? So, but it's not coming, so it will be for markup. Other questions? Not necessarily DPR. We can open the floor for anything else.
Sorry, Mr. Chair, I didn't quite understand. Did you have a question about DPR that you expected others to ask?
I expected that this would be a discussion, but I think that we can go to markup with this. I don't have actually a question about that. I mean, I know the options and.
About the PAYGO question?
Yes.
Okay, gotcha.
I guess kind of a broader philosophical question for us all to contemplate. As far as, PAYGO and deferral of projects and everything, I think I'm perceiving that there's maybe 2 mindsets in terms of decide now that we're going to defer PAYGO projects and, maybe figure out what they are later, or wait until a June conversation to decide about deferral period. And I don't know if the manager or staff may have insight onto which of those might work best, but I don't know if my colleagues would like to just kind of share where they're at. I think I am at I'd rather have the conversation in June, and I think we will have enough time and flexibility to do what we need to do at that point, rather than mandating something now that we may not have enough information to do smartly and in a targeted, intentional way. But it's not quite parks, but it involves parks-related projects. And I think that's one area where I don't know that I know everyone's views yet.
Comments on that?
Sure. So, I'm fully aligned. Helmut Kohl was a great guy, but the Germans, right, they decided to have a 3% structural cap for a decade during the midst of the lowest growth period of Germany. That's not me. we're in a rainstorm or a snowstorm or whatever you want to call it. I don't want to I don't want to spend any money, but I don't want to require us to I don't want to stop. Like, we don't know. My guess is what's in the continuing resolution is not the worst case scenario. And we don't know that yet. The 7-month continuing resolution is the worst case scenario. So I would just, that's my instinct. That does not mean I am fully, I think my Cherrydale question kind of reflected. I am not, if you give me decent enough reasons, I can have an exception to that. But I don't want to, I don't want to spend, I don't want to commit ourselves to a fiscal rigidity at this moment, nor do I want to be at all, it's the most in need things. We all have at least 10 things that we would like to spend money on that I do not think that we can spend money on. So I'm more aligned with where you are. Let's find a little more data. Let's not spend any money. Let's delay, let's not spend any money we don't have to, but let's not make structural decisions, particularly on one-time issues, until June.
Okay, so this is the carefully wait and see, right? And Ms. Cunningham.
Yeah, I mean, I think I would, I think I'm open to waiting till June, but I wanted, and the staff knows that I wanted us to dig through and make sure we felt comfortable and staff knew that we were interested and serious about the possibility of pausing some things this year. And so while those are not dollars spent until next year, I know from being on the staff side of various bureaucracies, you're working on things already and prioritizing your time. So I do want it to be clear both to the community and to the staff that every year we look at PAYGO carefully, and this year even more so. And every year, deferring a project you're going to do anyway, it makes it more expensive in the long run, potentially. But this is a year that we are more likely to do that, given the number of unknowns. I'm perfectly comfortable having gone through and convinced myself that we could carve out 20% if we had to, that we can wait till June to decide which ones, but I felt it was important and helpful for staff to know some of the ones that seemed right to me, some of which were wrong. So we've got the paving back out, but just to have that signal, have that conversation now, so we're not jammed at June, and for staff more broadly throughout the organization, they're not running forward on some things that may slow up for a bit.
Yeah, just from my side, it was not Helmut Kohl, it was Wolfgang Schäuble. He's the finance minister, but same party. So Christian Democrats. Yeah. Anyway, our budget guidance from December, actually, or November already, was saying that PAYGO is something that we have to look at, and we encourage to stagger priorities in ways that can be reduced if necessary, right? So I'm more or less where Mr. DeFerranti is on this. I think for the sanity and the technical completeness of the budget, it's a good thing to appropriate now with the flag that we will be looking at this one way or the other before the fiscal year starts, and having the first quarter of the calendar year and approaching the second quarter of the calendar year, or the last quarter of the fiscal year, having some data in, because we will have to see how the entirety of our local economy, regional economy, and national economy will perform. I mean, in 2 days from now, we may be in a completely different fiscal place. So therefore, I think that we do our job right now. We construct the budget as it with the best information we have right now, but we have to be ready for pivoting the moment that we need to. What's incumbent upon us on this side of the table is to have a clear hierarchy about what would be, our first choice, second choice, third choice. I think that this is something we need to still talk about, and that's work that needs to be done. And this is not only limited to us, but probably also something that we have to convey to our colleagues on the APS side, etc. It depends really on the magnitude of impact. So that's what I had. Other questions or issues? Well, okay. Or no, across and enterprise-wide. Ms. Coffey.
No, I just was saying on anything we want. I guess I would ask the manager. I think that we have some more details with respect to the public safety compensation that was shared with us that I think it would be helpful to have discussed more broadly, because I think the picture with respect to compensation is a lot more complicated than what is written
Right, so
down.
we have a written follow-up, which is going out in the next day. I did want to spend a little bit of time, because since the sheriff made his presentation, we haven't had an opportunity to talk about this. But I did make reference several times in the proposed budget and also in at least one or two of the work sessions to what the board decided, it was actually last summer, to allocate additional funding for public safety compensation. In that bucket of additional funding, and what's the number, $725,000 was set aside for the sheriff's office. Okay. And so that $725,000 was set aside to deal with issues associated with corporals in the sheriff's office. And when the sheriff came before the county board, he was talking about sheriff's deputies. Now I'm going to try to simplify this as much as I can, but the folks in the jails who are doing the hardest work and dealing directly with the inmates in the jails include corporals. And that cohort of sheriff's staff are not getting a 3.5% pay increase, but they will be getting, if the money is used the way we intended, an 8.5% increase. So that needs, we'll be laying that out. So the sheriff wasn't completely correct, nor am I completely correct if I said everybody in the sheriff's office is getting more than 3.5%. There's a cohort of deputies that are getting 3.5%. And then the next category up, which are corporals, will be eligible for 8.5%. And also in the follow-up we're going to give to you, there is an opportunity for the sheriff to promote, and I'm not saying he should or he shouldn't, people from the deputy slot to the corporal slot. And that actually would, those individuals would then end up getting a 10% increase when they go from one slot to the other. Now, you can't promote all the deputies up to corporals. That just isn't consistent with the structure you want to have. So we're going to lay this all out in an answer. So I know we received several questions from the board. There will be a component of staff who work in the sheriff's office that will only be getting a 3.5% pay raise with 2% range movement. But it's not the entire set of people working in the sheriff's office. So I think we owe you more precision on that, and that's what will be coming in the next day.
Thank you. Mr. Manager, Ms. Cunningham.
On that same topic, I think we've asked for some more detail about the salary studies that we have done comparing to other jurisdictions. If we can break that out by the positions or roughly or whatever way is reasonable, that would be helpful. Like, are we fine on some and we're not fine on others? My memory is we were really less fine on corporals, which is why we put the money in there to address compression there. But would love to have that data. In addition, I know we've talked about retention has improved quite drastically for the sheriff. I'd like to know if that is different by those different levels, like how it's changed over time, and whether the vacancies are concentrated, right? So like, are we attracting people? Are we retaining them? And are we paying fairly compared to comparable, at each of these levels? It sounds like we need to get a little more detailed.
Right. I don't know those answers, but if they exist, we will have them for you, certainly.
And then one other one while I'm asking is, how many years have we set aside bonus funds for the sheriff's office, and how have we spent, or how has the sheriff spent them?
Mm-hmm.
And then I would just lift up two other answers to questions that the staff has been working diligently on. Thank you so much. Could you highlight the fire and police ranges of compensation change as well? I don't have it committed to memory. And then I think another one that I do have jotted down here is that we'd asked about residency in Arlington.
Yeah, since we're going to wait till Emily or
I can read
Richard.
those off while she's pulling it up. Yeah.
sent those to you in the last 2 hours, so.
Yeah. The residency is for fire 13%, police 35%, and sheriff 10%, just because that goes into the mix. But I don't remember the range of the salaries, and I can look it up too.
Okay, so police bargaining unit, minimum 2.3%, average 9, max 21. This is in the follow-up. Fire bargaining unit, minimum 1, average 11, max 30. And again, with the mins, it's, hitting up against the ceilings. So there's a summary.
That was one of the answers. And just so you understand, and we've had these conversations about how the money gets spread across the workforce, have been collaborative conversations with the collective bargaining representatives. Some, because obviously if you're sitting next to somebody and they say, wow, I got a 27% increase this year, you only got 2%. That is really meant to address the understanding we had, which the board endorsed after the arbitrators made the decision, the collective bargaining agreement. We went another step and actually adopt steps. Steps equal years of service. So that's why it varies depending on where a person is. The other question I think you had asked about was it the percentage of people who are in the department that work in the county, who are county residents? Yeah, and that answer is, for fire, it's 13%. That's 42 officers. For police, it's 35%. 109 of the staff, and then for sheriff, it's 10% or 19.
Great. And all that's really helpful, I think, in our overall thinking. I think the work that has been done in the bargaining with police and fire, you see the same pattern where you've got different levels of increase because there were different levels of compression and challenges, and the averages don't quite tell the story. I appreciate the breakouts.
And if I may add to that, it's also that the pre-existing step system is evolving, right? This is a different number of steps now, so therefore there is...
Yes, and then not only a different number, the goal is actually over time to reduce the number of steps.
Correct. So therefore also
Right.
the difference between steps...
Now some, I'm not one of them, would say there should only be one step, but we'll deal with that in collective.
Well, we have one step for our non-uniformed personnel, right? So this is a completely different philosophy of compensation that we decided to apply, or in some cases reapply, to our uniformed services. Other questions or discussion, Vice Chair DeFerrante?
I sort of hinted that I might ask this to the manager. And Metro, do we know if we'll get a sense before Thursday of how that breaks out? Or Priya, I heard you loud and clear on Priya.
Yeah, and so, we don't, and we can send you the information. I don't know what the schedule is for Metro on formally adopting its budget. They've just come forward with the preliminary estimates, and I think they're still having budget hearings. We'll get back to you. We will not know before next week the answer to that question, but we will definitely know the answer in June. And the other piece of information, and I don't do this to freak everybody out, which is that on the federal side of issues, right now, what the administration is doing is that they're preparing their budget for the next fiscal year, which starts in October. And with a new administration coming in, typically they usually don't put that out. Normally, that budget comes out in February. This probably will end up coming out in the next 60 days. And you can expect, I think it's not a bold statement to say, you will see particularly huge cuts to a number of federal agencies and funding there. The question then is going to be, in June, will you know how Congress is going to react to that? You do not, because that probably won't happen until the fall. So we have to, I'm just getting you all ready for a little bit like COVID. We'll come back in June. We may come back in October. We may be coming back several times during the next fiscal year.
Got it. So it could be helpful for me to have staff's recommendation on if we do anything on the because what happens Thursday is not a down to the dollar, but pretty close to down to the dollar discussion without, of where people are on a lot of line item numbers, and the chair will figure out exactly, but that's, each of the 5 years I've been here before, that's what we've done, and it helps. The reasoning behind that, as I understand it, is that DMF, you guys should not be having us doing wild swings in the last few days of like what we're doing. You like to lock it in and know the line items, and you know exactly what we're doing on the budget. So you have to write the tax pieces of it, and there has to be alignment, but you also have to write some of the detail on it. So if staff were able to do a recommendation, and however you want to do, being fiscally conservative, responsible, and pushing to June, if there is any recommendation on Metro, that'd be.
Yeah, and I think that when Jason Freese was here last week, he had a relatively round number about what the difference is going to be. We can get you a more precise number on that, knowing that, of course, the Metro Board will act and it could change later on, but I think it'll probably be very close to what we'll be able to provide you.
Great, and I'm thinking almost all one time because
Yes.
the PREA comments that you mentioned, even if there is some things that nominally could be ongoing, the history of us providing a dedicated funding stream for Metro is zero, so.
Yep, on that very happy note. Other questions or comments? Ms. Cunningham?
I think FAC brought up the question of really maximizing our space utilization. And the question to staff is there any one-time funding or support that could help us really tackle that this year? So if, Aurora Highlands Senior Center is open only 3 days, could a nonprofit lease and operate YMCA programs there or something to that effect? Is there a way we can get smarter during these lean times to meet community needs and use our space as fully as possible?
So let me just state for the record, we can always get smarter. Secondly, I'm going to use as an example, and you can say I'm going to sound like a bureaucrat because that's exactly what I'm going to sound like here. When it came to Arlington Mill and we had empty space there, we actually had to go through a process with the community and say we had a request for interest from the community, and then we had to go through a process where we picked whoever it was that was going to end up using that empty space. And we did that there because we knew that empty space would never be used on an ongoing basis for something else. We would have to weigh that in particular circumstances. For example, on Aurora Hills and the senior center there, I had in my budget, if we had more money, I'd like to go to 5 days a week there. I really would. And I wouldn't want to set up a situation there where we're letting an outside group come in and get to use that space. It's a balancing kind of thing. So I actually don't think it's a money issue as much as it is dealing with the circumstances. And right now I would feel uncomfortable with that specific example. But we are also doing building planning, as I said, to try to reduce our space. Because there's plenty of places where we have space right now where I know we're not going to use it. And I want to try to eliminate buildings. I think I mentioned Court Square West. But we can do a little bit more. When we come back in June, and I'm not just saying this because June seems so far away, it's not. But you had asked us to do a look at our capital budget, CIP, a midterm assessment on that. That's one of the things I think we can come back to and give you a sense of how we're doing on space there. But as of right now, there isn't anything that leaps to mind that would fit into that bucket. But it's a fair question.
Great. And I think we've heard it from FAC. I think we've heard it from JFAC. And it's just a good time to have a reflection on that. Are there technological ways that we can better lease spaces for short periods of time and have full cost recovery? Are there facilities that are closing at 5 p.m. that could be used by scrappy arts organizations or by scrappy...
Yeah, you're looking for a county Airbnb. I get it. So I know what you're talking about.
Just make sure you pay your taxes.
I think in the example that Mark gave on Arlington Mill too, it's also, that was over a year. I mean, it wasn't a next fiscal, easily executable or quickly executable process. So yes, I think it's something we should be looking at, but at the same time, also cognizant of the time horizon that it takes to actually affect something like that.
I have to say that as somebody Arlington Mill is a very good case study. very good case study because it has all the ingredients. It has, nonprofits who came later and we've tried to find and they're still there, Phoenix Bikes. We had something that was built in the guidance for Aspire, what was built in the guidance, and it was a real challenge to, the build out, the interior build out, etc. We have Seek in there. So this is, Arlington Mill is the place. I have to say, I'm somebody who tried to negotiate that for the nonprofit I was working for, and it didn't work out. What I can say for sure is that the financial bottom line of that. The county board was of a different opinion back then than I was. So, and I'm still of a different opinion. But it has an interesting. This is always an interesting thing to think about. What I saw in Arlington Mill is that the bottom line is basically zero, the fiscal bottom line, and we may accommodate more uses, etc. There's something to think about when we think about 3,700 for Mile Run, when we think about the buildings that we somewhat co-finance for Signature, etc., and how these are used, or other assets that the police department is using for storage, etc. I think this is a very good conversation to have in the frame of looking how our CIP performs rather than how our pay-go performs. But it's a good...
Well, and I think it'd be a question of, are there revenue opportunities, particularly if things are moving around? Related is sponsorships and advertising. I know we've been more cautious than some jurisdictions historically about leasing space for advertising. It's crucial to have very, very clear guidelines for that, obviously, but I think this is, again, a year it's an opportunity to reflect on, could we use the sides of our buses? Could we use the tops of our buildings? Could we use the fences at our parks to provide some sponsorship or advertising opportunities, as well as just communication channels for ourselves? And I'm wondering if that's been considered recently and I need to catch up, or it could be considered this year, and what would be needed?
The short answer is yes, no, and maybe, but let me explain. We do have policies in place about advertising that we can have in our parks. And we've come to the board on several occasions around naming rights. We've done it on a couple of occasions down at Barcroft, with George Washington University, and with Marymount down at the soccer fields at Longbridge. So we do have policies in place for that. And I know that we also have looked at some advertising opportunities on Capital Bike Share. That's a regional conversation that's never really quite launched itself, given all the parties involved. But some of the other things, and so we've done, for example, on Gateway Park, for us to look into potentially doing some naming rights there, we typically on that, we don't have the in-house expertise to do that. We'll go out and get an outside group to help us. That is a pretty involved process. It's something I think we're going to consider doing, but it requires some money to be put on the table first before we get the money later. And I know I think I've had this conversation running now for 14 years with John Weistat about putting advertising in the art buses. Ooh. And there's not a lot of money to be had there, and we've looked at it a few times, but we will dust that off and bring that back for you to take a look at.
Great, thank you.
Thank you. There is one question that's in front of us, which is the Aquatic Center, right? So this is actually a sponsored project because we have a big...
Well, yes, we have a sponsorship agreement with Boeing right now that's still in place, and I'm going to get that. They have naming rights on the fields for, I think, 10 years. Michelle, is that right? Yeah, it's 10 years. And we're not, resting, we're always out there sort of trying to see what we can have happen, and I'm just going to leave it at that. I hope to always come forward with opportunities for you to take advantage of. This is not probably the best economic circumstance we're in. I wanted to get Nestle to name this room the County Board Chocolate Emporium, but they weren't interested, but we're going to keep working at it.
Okay. The Nespresso corner. Anyway, any other questions, colleagues, or comments?
I just wanted to take a minute because Emily's going to go through the questions we currently have in the pipeline. That doesn't mean, I just want to be clear about this. We pay close attention. We have a lot of folks from the board office. I wanted to thank Mason and David and Jonathan and everybody who've been tracking. We don't want to leave anything aside, but I'll have Emily go through the questions that we're planning on answering. If you say, you know what, that was a really good question when I thought of it 6 weeks ago, but I have no idea what I was thinking, please tell us that.
Okay, so there's a shorter list now compared to what y'all have in writing so far, but there's one question on the stabilization reserve that's in the works, one on sheriff pay that we've talked about a little bit today, two on PAYGO. One was a clarification of a number in the presentation, and another on sidewalk conditions. There was a grouping of questions for AED that Ms. Cunningham had asked. Some were answered in the work session and others are coming in written follow-up. There's one question on what happens when buildings convert from office to residential for the bids. There is another question on the sheriff job family studies, how that we compare across other jurisdictions. There's another HR question on tuition reimbursement. And the last one from HR is the demographics of the workforce. So that's what we've got in the pipeline right now.
Excellent. Thank you very, very much. So, colleagues, any other questions or comments for this wrap-up session? I mean, the real wrap-up is ongoing until markup and actually until even beyond that. Mr. Spain?
I mean, no additional questions. I think, Mark said, the manager said 6 weeks. I mean, well, my first iteration of this, I'm really absorbing quite a bit. But you said something earlier that, first time I've heard you say it, you said we were going to come back to you. We owe you precision. I want to commend you on that. I like that. That's what we try to strive and do and give precision. Precision is always a good way to go. So I just want to thank everyone for this process. And again, I'm still learning a good bit, and it's been a very enlightening experience. I know we're not done, Mr. Chair, but this engagement is something that makes us all better. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Spain. I'm going to Ms. Coffey and then to Ms. Cunningham and then to Vice Chair DeFranti.
Yeah, thank you to staff and your staff as well as our staff who really have done a phenomenal amount of work keeping us on board this year. I would just encourage, as a message to myself and our colleagues, as much as possible, I would like to leave this table today knowing the full universe of questions that remain out there. I'm sure that we can all continue to come up with new and interesting discussion points, but I think, we really need to be honing in the final stretches here. And so if there's anything else that is on your mind, I just really would push us to voice that before we leave this table and not after. And then as well, in terms of any proposals or amendments, making sure that we have clarity on what exactly it is that people are asking for. I think some things are self-explanatory. I think other things deserve at least a little 2 sentences to a paragraph to explain specifically what people mean. I think that will help all of us as we approach Thursday when we're doing markup? Thursday's work session, to really be on the same page and also know, I think, that enough thought and planning has gone into things to make them implementable and not just vague 30,000 foot desires of things to happen. So that's a task for us, not for staff, but I think it's really important that we leave here with that direction to make everyone's lives as productive as possible over the next 3 days.
Thank you, Ms. Coffey. Very well said. Ms. Cunningham and then Ms. Vice Chair DeFranti.
I just have a question for our leadership and staff about the part of the budget that we fund but don't control, which is APS. Is there any update on their schedule or questions or anything that should be elevated here? I haven't heard a lot.
I have not heard anything. We had a conversation as recently as Friday, and there was no additional information at that time.
At the risk, Ms. Cunningham and I spoke earlier. I think it's a good question, and it's on us to engage with them over the next couple of days. we're not going to know what the legislature, because the governor vetoed a bunch, but we should have another conversation over the next day or two about that, I think. And all of us can do that only in twos.
I know you're going to go to the vice chair in a second, but I did want to add one thing so we have clarity on this. Usually the practice, and I'm looking at the chair and vice chair on this, budget guidance, which, as we like to say, doesn't cost anything, except some sleepless nights on the part of staff, which is perfectly fine. Traditionally, I think you work on the draft of that, and that does not come on Thursday. That will come with the actual budget adoption on the following Wednesday. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
But it's a work that needs to be, this is language that needs to be vetted and discussed. So therefore, it will be now it's the time where we get to a place of what individual board members want to contribute budget guidance. I have several, not too many, but and I know my colleagues as well. Ms. Cunningham, any more? Vice Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So just in the vein of trying to get everything on the table as much as possible without trying to be, I did have a conversation. I think I have a countable number of ongoing things that I'm even interested in. That's less than 7, I believe. I did have a conversation with Commonwealth's attorney to align some one-time as well as a little bit of ongoing for the deputy. I am interested in the code enforcement position, which early on when we were wishing for everything in the world, we were all in favor of. And now there was a period where I didn't think we could reach it, but we had a whole separate work session on code enforcement. And 63 to 90 days is just hard, so it makes it into my top 4 or 5, which is better than my brackets because my wife is destroying me in the March Madness brackets.
That's what you get.
Yeah.
Being with Duke.
Yes, it's true. So,
Fighting word.
and then there is a piece of guidance that I really want to work with Ms. Cowan, and that is money related to a request we have for after school that I want to not surprise colleagues on. I think I've spoken individually with folks, but that's a guidance thing, but it's still, I don't want to surprise people. I think that adaptive reuse, the one time, this is not a DMF question, but it is because you already answered a question today on adaptive reuse. Is it plausible to offer an AED opinion on the advisability of one-time funding to hold off on adaptive reuse? This seems consistent to me with CMRI. It's 86,000.
Yeah, no, I can already channel what AD would say on that, which is that, of course, you should lessen the burden to use the adaptive reuse tool. So, yeah, that's what they said.
Okay.
Just got transmitted to me.
Great. It's a small enough dollar amount. I don't know where we are on one time. I'm keeping, and I'll share with folks, but those are some of the details I do think it might be useful. I will wait on all the sheriffs, but I also think that it might be useful to have a conversation that's, if it's plausible, with you, Ms. Cowan, and because there's a lot of different things, and the dollar amount is way less. I'll wait till we see the written responses, but there's different people. There's the sheriff, his administrative person, Ms. Foster, and I just want to flag that I may hope for such a conversation.
Thank you, Mr. DeFerranti. Any other comments? No?
I thought of
Yes.
another one.
Ms. Coffey.
I think there's been some conversations about, for the public defender, a fellowship level person or similar to do reentry services coordination. That was what I was kind of going to ask is, have we checked with the Office of Public Defender that a fellowship level person would be welcome or useful or attainable for them? I just want to make sure that we're not putting something in.
I'm recalling, at least when Ms. Carpenter came, she said that she would accept that.
Yeah.
And I think the question was costing it out, and I
Yeah.
think,
I believe we should email on that to actually answer your question.
Okay.
yeah, so
Great.
we can send that back to you.
Again, just getting the full universe of things left to figure out. I think that's one thing that making sure we are really right on that is important. And then I think that'll be all right now.
So I'm just trying to retrieve a motion here. It's not loading, so if you can send me the... Yeah. Okay, here I have. Okay, colleagues, then.
Okay. Are we closing questions?
Yes, if you have one.
I think this is in the AED category of questions, but I wanted to elevate for the community. We've had some conversation, obviously, as we've been talking about meals tax. We've been talking about a challenging economic environment for a lot of folks, but especially for our restaurant owners, operators, and staff. And I just want to elevate for the community that we are discussing if there's anything more we can do for restaurants in way of marketing support or open rewards, in addition to the process improvement and sort of lightning speed efforts that CRMI 3.0 represents. And I wondered if you want to elevate any of that I know there are questions in, but if there's anything you want to share with the community, because I think that's of a lot of importance to all of us. Our restaurants are crucial for our communities and placemaking, and while I think we're leaning towards meals tax increase, it makes sense, we also want to really, really support our restaurants.
Yeah, I don't have anything right at this minute, so we'll follow up on that.
Okay.
Yep.
Great. And then the only other question, Chair, is the CBO and CMO budgets. I know we weren't going to do full presentations, but might we put the pages up or have a brief? Is that after this motion?
We can ask now if you want. This is a wrap-up session, so we can, if you have a discussion or a question about.
I think it's only natural because here's the CMO and here's the county manager's office and here's the county board's office, that we naturally have all those questions and conversations offline to some extent. But to the community, I think it is important that we at least show those budget pages and share them. I don't know if there's an easy way to just pull up the top line there and highlight any changes that have happened this year. And I don't think there's a whole lot of questions because I think it's gotten worked out offline, but just for transparency. Apologies for not giving you a heads up.
Yeah, and my mind is going to blank on me, but I did want to say for all the people in the community who are wondering about the county manager's office, we currently have, well, not quite 6 vacancies, but we have 2 vacancies, which I think we've referenced previously when our assistant county manager, Gurjit Chima, presented in our human rights office. And we actually have just brought some temp staff on, and we're optimistic for the unfortunate reasons that there is a lot of staff that do EEO work that are going to be available, that will be able to fill those 2 vacancies. We have 2 positions that also came over with the climate policy office that we haven't filled. We have another position that Ms. Ibrahim is trying to fill with the independent policing auditor. And then we have another position, our legislative liaison position. I know a lot of people in the community ask what we're going to do. We're in conversations to figure out how that dovetails with what the board's going to do with its staffing. So that's generally where we are. And, my office last year gave up a deputy county manager position. So I'd like to say we're stretched thin, even though we're adding a bunch of staff, stretched thin in some of the core functions. And Richard, did you want to add anything else?
Yes, and then 2 positions moved over from DES into the manager.
I talked about that.
That's the climate policy.
That's the part where you weren't listening.
Which happens often.
Great. And then I would just say thank you for all the work this year on constituent services, because I know that's been a lift and some moving around of folks to make sure that CAPE and constituent services can really meet the ongoing community needs. So thank you.
True.
CBO,
I don't, for family reasons, our clerk, the chief of staff of the Arlington County board, right, is not available today. I think the biggest change in the county board office has been have been following guidance from the board and appropriations from the board have been hiring an additional communications FTE that is now with us since a month and a half, I believe, and we are looking forward to hire a policy advisory position for the board, so for all board members to be supported, and not only in administrative terms, but also with policy analysis and advice included in the county board office. What I can say is that, and I hope that colleagues will agree, in very tough times, the county board office has been really stepping up. I was also very happy to see that we could finally fill the position of the deputy clerk, who is very ably supporting this meeting today. They've been able to significantly reduce the way and the time that is needed to respond to everybody, or to the thousands of emails that we're getting, and to be extremely responsive and sensitive to public requests. I believe that this board has been setting the frame for professionalizing to a higher degree the county board office performance. That's a steady and evolving departure from the way we understood the county board office in previous years. I think this is a very welcome one, and in conversation I had with the community everywhere, this was actually welcomed from everybody. Right now, we don't have any vacancy, which is a good thing, I guess, and we just have we will have a pending position to advertise soon. Mr. Spain.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to share perspective as the newest addition to the board and strict observations that I've made. I think your point is well taken when you talk about, are we right-sized as a county board, right, to do the magnitude of work that comes with the community and businesses, well over 240,000 people. And, my quick thoughts, again, based on just observation, Mr. Manager, is something we need to perhaps consider down the road, how we shape as an organization. I will tell you, it's one thing to have, 30-minute meetings from 9 o'clock to 5 o'clock in the afternoon. But if all you're doing is having meetings, when are you having time to do your work? I mean, I'm just speaking for a county board, to be quite honest. And I think we really have to think about, are we, again, right-sized to be effective, right? I mean, everyone has their lanes. Everyone knows their roles, I think, to a certain extent. But we all arrived at this place really telling folks, or promising them at least, that we were going to take on a couple of issues, right? That being said, we all have to work in unison. And I'm still, again, observing and thinking that we aren't at the point really right-sized for a number of reasons. And that's just based on my years of being in different spaces as well. So as the chair alluded to, and what he's heard in the community is, it may come a time as we have discussions about even the form of government, right? Again, I'm not getting in front of anything, but these are conversations I quite honestly believe needs to happen, because just because we were the same way 50 years ago doesn't necessarily mean it's right today, right? And all communities evolve, and you evolve by really reflecting upon the normative where you were, where you are, and where you're trying to go. And we want to be able to meet people where they are, but also be responsive at a moment's notice and be precision, Mr. Manager. You know what I mean? Yeah, you used it. I used precision, I should say. So with that, I'm on board there, Mr. Chair, with thinking about that. I didn't know, 6 vacancies. Policy advisor, maybe just for transparency, opening. That's an open position right now?
It is not yet. It hasn't yet opened, but the board has given guidance, and it's part of our budget and the money.
Oh, okay.
The money is there for doing that. I mean, we appropriate it.
What did you say?
likely we will end up with some of the money back in carryover because we have not filled the position until probably likely nearing the start of the next fiscal year. So
Yeah.
one-time money, yeah.
Yeah, I think there's also a conversation to have, again, as we think about the legislative liaison, and this is just back to being public, based on my observation with the General Assembly and other things going only a certain time of the year, there may be ways to, as you talk about being effective, that you roll that position into one, right? Whether it's policy and legislative doing, again, that's another conversation to have.
Yeah, I would deeply caution against that.
Great. But that is something, but something we should really consider as a board down the road. Thank you.
So just as a footnote to that, yes, we asked for some money to be appropriated for these positions, both the second communications position and as a down payment for the policy position. The idea was to fill the first and then to digest it also, so that, to be able to work people in. And the times that we are living through are so interesting that in order for somebody to be worked in is like literally a huge challenge. Also for Mason Kushner, who is our county board clerk, and he's actually the director of this orchestra, right? So the original plan was to get started and advertise around this time of the year, so late March. We probably will have to go. We are the supervisors here. We'll have to go back and see when the county board office structure is ready to absorb the next position. I think we are approaching this place because everything that we've done so far is more or less on time and on budget. And I think that, and we have to really thank our personnel, especially our leading personnel, for extraordinary, and competent and focused implementation of what the board has given them to do under really extraordinary conditions from all points of view. So
I just want to, and I know my colleague, I just want to thank you for at least opening it up for a little bit to have this conversation, because far too many times people in the community don't even understand what's going on at the county board's office. So for you to even open up, I know this is markup, we're coming to the end, but to have that conversation in the lens of transparency, I really appreciate that. Thank you.
And there's scintillating reading, as you can see, that starts on page 176 of the budget document, which is posted. So everyone's invited to do that. One last thing, Mr. Chair, I wanted to make sure we highlighted is we have one position that's frozen in the office, and that is one of the 3 auditor office positions that is at the recommendation and support of our senior auditor, of the county board auditor. We've just upped staff to the 2 amazing and great folks, and we are going to hold on the 3rd until the very end, or the
Would that be
OCA? OCA.
Okay,
Yes.
just checking. The OCA, thank you. Office of
County Auditor.
And just to clarify, there's a little bit more discussion on that in the recording of our audit committee meeting from this past week, but basically to metabolize another new employee right now would really set back the actual auditing that the 2 employees we do have are able to do. And so they would rather focus on getting the office really highly functional before they bring in a 3rd person that requires onboarding and planning and in order to actually bring them into the doing of the work. So this is not being forced upon anyone. This is actually at his Auditor Wayne Scott's recommendation that we do this.
That's correct, and I'm remiss because I didn't mention that one of the promises that we made and kept was to actually fill this position of the second auditor. And actually, it is also an invitation to the public to go to the independent county auditor's website and see the first audit that was just published on the performance of housing grants and how these are. I think it's a very substantial audit, extremely insightful, and really a demonstration of how important the function is that we are supporting. And I think the two co-chairs, Ms. Cunningham and Ms. Coffey, as the senior co-chair of the committee, I think this is working very, very well, and it's something I truly am proud of to be able to show to.
I believe one of our audit committee members described it as what they hope will be the gold standard of audits going forward. So the feedback from our committee was extremely positive, and the feedback from the departmental staff as well that worked with Wayne Scott on the audit. I mean, they literally were begging him to come audit them more, which I'm not sure is an experience I've ever had with a group of people who had just been audited. So I think it says so much about the quality of work and relationships that he's been able to build even in just about 6 months.
Yes, indeed. So, colleagues, if without objection, I would like to close now the wrap-up session on the budget and move that the county board convenes a closed meeting as authorized by Virginia Code Section 2.2-3711A1 for discussions regarding the performance of the board appointee. Is there a second?
A second.
It's seconded by Mr. Spain. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
If nobody's against, the motion carries. We are in closed session.
Oh, we're not ready yet?
That's your iPhone? That's my personal one. Oh, so what'd you get? Oh, you're a big time.
You could go.
I got
If you were
16,
planning
yeah.
to. Although I would like you and Linda to you not to be working 24/7. But if you
Jonathan, needless to say that we are endlessly thankful that you can jump in and organize all this.
It's okay, nobody watches.
I don't think it matters.
Okay, so we're good to go to church. Karen, tell us.
Okay. So I will just certify us, right?
Yes, right.
Okay. The county board is back in session, in open session, in public session. Colleagues, I move that the members of the county board certify that at the just concluded closed session, first, only public business matters lawfully exempted from open meeting requirements under Chapter 37, Title 2.2 of the Code of Virginia, and second, only such public business matters as were identified in the motion by which the closed meeting was convened were heard, discussed, or considered by the board. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. De Ferranti, for the second. Mr. Clerk, can you please call the roll?
Yes. Chair Thomas,
Yes.
Vice Chair DeFerranti,
Yes.
Board Member Maureen Coffey,
Yes.
Board Member Susan Cunningham,
Yes.
Board Member Louis J. Spank.
Senior. Yes.
Thank you. The motion carries 5-0. Mr. Clerk, is there any other matter coming before the board tonight?
Sir, there is not.
Thank you. Without objections, we are adjourned.